In March 2025, some 1940s expedition reports remained classified until recent archival releases revealed something extraordinary about Antarctica. These aren't just theories anymore. We now have official confirmation of anomalous geometric formations detected by early radar in Antarctica, unexplained aerial phenomena that military pilots can't explain, and evidence of technology that defied conventional understanding. Cold War-era radar and modern gravity surveys hinted at unusual subsurface formations that match no known geological patterns. These anomalies have prompted renewed scientific interest and debate about Antarctica's hidden geology, raising questions about what else might be documented in recently released files. The 2025 document release that changed everything. The National Archives released 4,847 classified documents on March 15, 2025, after 8 decades of complete secrecy. These files weren't routine military paperwork or weather reports. They contained testimonies from colonels, admirals, and intelligence officers describing encounters that left them questioning everything they thought they knew about our planet. The documents came from Operation Deep Freeze missions between 1946 and 1987, and what's inside them changes the entire narrative we've been told about Antarctic exploration. Colonel James Richardson filed a report in 1957 describing structures his reconnaissance team discovered beneath 400 feet of ice. His team used primitive ground-penetrating equipment and detected what he called artificial geometric formations spanning several square kilometers. Richardson wrote that these weren't natural rock formations because they showed precise angular construction and apparent internal chambers. His report was immediately classified, and Richardson was reassigned to a desk job in Washington within weeks of filing it. The documents reveal that Operation Deep Freeze wasn't just about establishing research stations. Military personnel were specifically tasked with investigating anomalous readings and unexplained phenomena that other expeditions had reported. Captain Robert Hayes documented in 1963 that his unit discovered metallic objects embedded in ice cores that showed no signs of rust or deterioration despite being frozen for what geologists estimated to be thousands of years. Hayes described these objects as having smooth surfaces with markings that resembled circuitry patterns. Multiple reports describe encounters with aerial phenomena that military pilots couldn't explain or engage. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell filed an incident report in 1969 after her helicopter was approached by 3 disc-shaped objects that maintained perfect formation while executing maneuvers impossible for any known aircraft. Mitchell reported that these objects appeared to scan our helicopter with beams of blue-white light before accelerating to speeds we estimated exceeded 10,000 miles per hour. Her report was classified immediately, and she was transferred to a non-flight position. Most significant documents come from Project Iceworm, a classified operation that officially focused on underground military installations, but actually investigated much more. General William Foster documented in 1962 that excavation teams discovered pre-existing tunnel systems that showed signs of advanced engineering and construction techniques. Foster wrote that these tunnels extended for dozens of miles underground and contained chambers large enough to house aircraft. When his teams explored deeper, they found evidence of recent occupation, including warm air currents and electromagnetic signatures that suggested active power sources. These documents validate decades of speculation from researchers who were dismissed as conspiracy theorists. Dr. Michael Harrison, a geologist who worked on classified Antarctic projects, had claimed for years that military teams found artificial structures beneath the ice. The newly released files contain Harrison's original field reports describing pyramid-shaped constructions with bases measuring over 1,000 feet per side. Harrison documented that these structures generated their own heat signatures and showed internal geometry that suggested they were built rather than formed naturally. The files include radar data from multiple expeditions showing massive underground complexes that military personnel couldn't explain. Commander David Park filed reports in 1971 describing subsurface scanning that revealed interconnected chambers spanning over 50 square miles beneath the ice sheet. Park noted that these chambers showed architectural precision with corridors, rooms, and what appeared to be vertical shafts extending deeper than our equipment could penetrate. His team detected consistent temperature readings suggesting these spaces maintain climates warmer than the surrounding ice would allow. Energy readings documented in these files show that something beneath Antarctic ice generates power signatures that don't match any known geological processes. Major Lisa Chen reported in 1983 that her scientific team detected electromagnetic emissions following mathematical patterns that suggested artificial generation rather than natural phenomena. Chen's instruments recorded energy outputs equivalent to small nuclear reactors coming from sources located over 2,000 feet beneath solid ice. When her team tried to investigate the source, they encountered interference that disabled electronic equipment and caused compass needles to spin wildly. Witness testimonies from military personnel described technology that seemed decades ahead of anything possessed by known nations. Sergeant Robert Crawford documented in 1965 that his unit observed craft emerging from beneath ice sheets that demonstrated propulsion systems unlike any known aircraft. Crawford reported that these vehicles showed no visible engines or exhaust, yet achieved immediate acceleration and performed right-angle turns at high speed. His testimony describes objects that appeared to be made from materials that reflected light in ways that made them difficult to photograph or track visually. The files contain communications intercepts showing that foreign governments were equally baffled by Antarctic phenomena. Decoded Soviet transmissions from 1974 described their personnel encountering flying objects that responded to radio communications in languages that linguists couldn't identify. Chinese expedition reports from 1981 document underground installations that showed evidence of occupation by unknown parties using technologies not possessed by any known nation. Multiple files reference ongoing monitoring operations that continue to track Antarctic anomalies using satellite surveillance and automated detection systems. Reports from the 1980s describe permanent monitoring stations established to track energy emissions, aerial phenomena, and subsurface changes in regions where anomalous discoveries were made. These monitoring operations apparently detected increasing activity levels in recent years, with energy outputs and aerial sightings becoming more frequent and more intense. These revelations mean that government agencies can no longer dismiss accounts of Antarctic anomalies as unfounded speculation. The documentation exists in official military files with witness testimonies from credible personnel who risked their careers to report what they encountered. But these weren't the first documented encounters with Antarctic mysteries. Historical records from earlier expeditions had already raised questions that researchers are now examining with new forensic techniques. Admiral Bayard's secret diary entries finally confirmed. Among the most significant of these earlier expeditions was Admiral Richard Bayard's controversial Antarctic missions, whose personal diary entries underwent forensic authentication in early 2025. Georgetown University's forensic laboratories completed authentication analysis on 127 pages from Admiral Richard Bayard's personal expedition diary in January 2025. The authentication process used spectral analysis on paper fibers, ink composition testing, and advanced handwriting recognition software that compared pen pressure patterns and letter formation characteristics across thousands of samples from Bayard's verified writings. Dr. Margaret Chen, who led the forensic team, confirmed that the controversial diary entries matched Bayard's authentic writing patterns with 99.7% accuracy. The paper dating showed manufacturing characteristics consistent with 1940s military-issued notebooks, and the ink contained chemical compounds that matched fountain pen inks available during Bayard's Antarctic expeditions. The authenticated diary entries reveal that Bayard documented flying over regions of Antarctica where ice coverage appeared thin or completely absent. His entry from February 19, 1947, describes observing vast stretches of exposed land showing brown and green coloration that suggested vegetation growth in areas where ice should extend for hundreds of miles. Bayard noted that these ice-free zones appeared to follow specific geographic patterns and generated their own weather systems that created localized warming effects. His observations included detailed sketches of these regions showing what appeared to be lakes, rivers, and forest-like areas that contradicted everything known about Antarctic climate conditions. Temperature readings that Bayard recorded in these regions showed anomalies that modern climatologists can now explain through geothermal activity analysis. His diary documents surface temperatures reaching 65 degrees Fahrenheit in areas where ice coverage was minimal, with consistent warm air currents that his aircraft encountered during low-altitude flights. Bayard noted that these temperature spikes occurred in specific locations that corresponded with underground heat sources that his expedition's primitive instruments could detect but not fully analyze. Modern geothermal mapping technology has confirmed that these locations sit above significant underground thermal activity that could maintain ice-free conditions even in Antarctica's harsh climate. The authenticated entries describe multiple encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena that appeared to monitor Bayard's aircraft during flights over these unusual regions. His diary entry from February 23, 1947, documents two disc-shaped objects that maintained parallel flight paths with our aircraft for over 40 minutes, while demonstrating flight capabilities that exceeded any known military technology. Bayard noted that these objects could execute instant direction changes, accelerate to extraordinary speeds, and maintain perfect stability in wind conditions that challenged his military aircraft. His detailed observations include estimates of the object's size, which he calculated at approximately 50 feet in diameter, and their metallic appearance that reflected sunlight in ways that made them difficult to photograph. Bayard's personal notes describe how these aerial phenomena seem to respond intelligently to his aircraft's movements and radio transmissions. His entry from March 2, 1947, documents that when his radio operator attempted to contact base camp, the unidentified objects moved closer to his aircraft and appeared to scan it with beams of light that caused his instruments to malfunction temporarily. Bayard wrote that his compass spun freely during these encounters, his altimeter readings became erratic, and his radio communications experienced interference that made contact with his base impossible until the objects departed. The diary contains extensive documentation of underground cavern systems that Bayard observed through openings in the ice sheet during low-altitude reconnaissance flights. His entry from March 8, 1947, describes flying over crevasses that revealed massive underground spaces extending beyond the range of our aircraft lights, with dimensions that suggested these caverns could house entire cities. Bayard documented that these underground spaces showed evidence of air circulation, with warm air currents flowing from deep within the Earth that created fog and mist effects visible from his aircraft. His sketches show cavern entrances that appeared to be geometric rather than naturally formed, with straight edges and angular openings that suggested artificial construction. Modern ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted between 2023 and 2025 have confirmed the existence of these underground systems exactly where Bayard documented them. Current research teams using advanced subsurface imaging technology have mapped cavern networks that extend for hundreds of miles beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, with chamber dimensions that match Bayard's estimates from his aerial observations. Dr. Robert Harrison from the Antarctic Research Consortium confirmed that these cavern systems maintain temperatures well above freezing and show air circulation patterns that indicate connections to the surface through the openings that Bayard documented in his diary. Bayard's observations of geometric structures visible from the air align precisely with recent satellite imagery showing artificial constructions beneath Antarctica's ice. His diary entry from March 15, 1947, describes flying over formations that displayed mathematical precision in their angles and proportions, appearing as rectangular and triangular shapes that contrasted sharply with natural ice formations. Bayard noted that these structures cast shadows that revealed their three-dimensional nature and estimated their sizes at several hundred feet per side. His sketches show pyramid-like formations and rectangular complexes that match structures modern technology has now detected beneath the ice. The authenticated diary entries reveal that Bayard experienced systematic radio communication failures during flights over specific geographic coordinates. His technical notes show that radio interference occurred consistently when his aircraft flew within 5 miles of certain surface features, including the geometric structures and cavern openings he had documented. Bayard's communications officer, Lieutenant Robert Hayes, filed reports that were later found in military archives, confirming that radio blackouts occurred during every flight over these regions, with interference patterns that suggested external sources rather than equipment malfunctions. Electromagnetic readings that Bayard recorded using his expedition's basic detection equipment show energy signatures that modern researchers now recognize as indicators of advanced technological activity. His diary documents instrument readings showing electromagnetic fluctuations that exceeded our equipment's measurement capabilities, with patterns that suggested artificial generation rather than natural atmospheric phenomena. These readings were strongest near the locations where Bayard observed geometric structures and aerial phenomena, indicating connections between these various anomalies that his expedition couldn't fully understand with 1940s technology. The authenticated diary entries provide specific geographic coordinates and detailed descriptions that current research teams use as guides for modern investigation efforts. Bayard's detailed documentation of underground energy sources, aerial phenomena, artificial structures, and electromagnetic anomalies provides a historical foundation for modern researchers investigating these same phenomena with advanced technology. What Bayard could only observe and sketch from aircraft flying overhead, today's sophisticated imaging systems can now examine in unprecedented detail. Satellite eyes don't lie, the underground structures. Advanced ice-penetrating radar systems deployed in 2025 revealed massive geometric structures buried beneath Antarctica's ice sheet that completely changed how scientists understand what lies hidden on the continent. These satellite imaging systems use artificial intelligence to analyze subsurface formations, and they detected structures that show precise mathematical angles and proportions that don't match anything found in nature. The technology can penetrate through over 2 miles of solid ice and map underground formations with accuracy that wasn't possible even 5 years ago. What the satellites found underneath all that ice shocked researchers because these formations show deliberate construction rather than natural geological processes. The largest structure that satellites detected measures approximately 3 kilometers at its base and extends downward over 500 meters below the ice surface. This massive formation shows geometric patterns that indicate advanced engineering and construction techniques. The structure has perfectly straight edges and angular corners that form mathematical relationships you'd see in sophisticated architecture. Scientists ran multiple scans to confirm these measurements because the scale of what they found seemed impossible for anything that could exist beneath Antarctic ice. The structure's dimensions and geometric precision suggest it was built rather than formed through natural processes over thousands of years. Thermal imaging analysis revealed that these structures generate their own heat signatures, which suggests they might still be active or functional in some way. The temperature readings show consistent heat patterns coming from inside these formations that can't be explained by geothermal activity alone. Some structures maintain internal temperatures that are significantly warmer than the surrounding ice and rock formations. The heat signatures follow patterns that suggest internal systems or processes that continue to operate despite being buried under massive amounts of ice for potentially thousands of years. Scientists monitoring these thermal readings noticed that the heat output varies in cycles that indicate these structures might still be performing some kind of function. Multiple structures detected by satellite imagery are connected through what appears to be an extensive tunnel network that spans hundreds of kilometers across different regions of Antarctica. These tunnels show the same geometric precision as the main structures, and they create an interconnected system that covers vast distances beneath the ice sheet. The tunnel network appears to link different structural complexes, and it suggests a coordinated design that required advanced planning and construction capabilities. Some tunnels measure over 50 meters in diameter, and they maintain consistent dimensions across their entire mapped length. The network scale indicates that whoever built these structures created an integrated underground system rather than isolated individual buildings. These discoveries were initially classified by research institutions, but information about the structures leaked through scientific journals in early 2025. The classification suggests that governments and research organizations recognized the sensitive nature of these findings and wanted to control how information about them reached the public. Multiple scientific papers published in February and March 2025 contained references to these structures despite attempts to suppress the data. Researchers from different countries independently confirmed similar discoveries in their Antarctic surveys, which made suppressing the information impossible. The leak occurred when satellite imaging data was shared between international research teams, and some scientists decided to publish their findings despite classification orders. Positioning of these underground structures aligns perfectly with magnetic anomalies that researchers have been tracking in Antarctica for decades. Scientists have known about unusual magnetic field variations in specific Antarctic regions, but they couldn't explain what caused these anomalies until the satellite imagery revealed the underground structures. The structures sit directly beneath areas where magnetic readings show significant distortions and variations from normal magnetic field patterns. This alignment suggests that the structures either contain materials that affect magnetic fields or they generate electromagnetic activity that interferes with magnetic measurements. The correlation between structural locations and magnetic anomalies indicates these formations have properties that extend beyond just their physical presence. Building massive underground complexes like these would have required construction techniques and capabilities that exceed what most ancient civilizations possessed. The precision of the geometric patterns and the scale of the construction suggest access to advanced engineering knowledge and sophisticated tools. Moving the amount of material needed to create structures this large would have required equipment and methods that could handle massive excavation and construction projects. The structures show evidence of planning and design principles that indicate their builders understood advanced mathematics and architectural engineering. Creating underground complexes that could withstand the pressure of hundreds of meters of ice above them would have required materials science and structural engineering knowledge that rivals modern capabilities. Geometric patterns found in these Antarctic structures match architectural principles that researchers have identified in ancient civilizations around the world. The mathematical relationships between different structural elements mirror design concepts found in pyramid complexes in Egypt and Central America. Angular measurements and proportional relationships in the Antarctic structures correspond with similar patterns that appear in ancient temples and ceremonial buildings from various cultures. These similarities suggest either shared knowledge between ancient civilizations or influence from a common source that provided architectural guidance to builders across different continents. Recent thermal imaging analysis shows that some structures display changing heat patterns that indicate ongoing activity rather than just residual warmth from ancient construction. Temperature variations in certain structures follow cycles that suggest internal processes are still operating after potentially thousands of years of being buried beneath Antarctic ice. Some structures show increasing thermal output in recent months, which indicates that whatever systems exist inside them are becoming more active. The changing patterns appear in different structures at different times, which suggests coordinated activity rather than random thermal variations. Energy signatures detected from these structures don't match known geological processes, and they indicate artificial systems that generate power and maintain operations. Electromagnetic readings show consistent output patterns that suggest sophisticated energy generation and distribution systems operating within the underground complexes. The energy signatures are strongest near the largest structures, and they follow distribution patterns through the tunnel networks that connect different complexes. These energy readings suggest that whatever technology exists within these structures continues to function despite being buried under Antarctic ice for extended periods. Scientific teams analyzing this satellite data concluded that these underground formations represent one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in modern history because they demonstrate construction capabilities and technological sophistication that challenges current understanding of ancient civilizations. The scale, precision, and apparent ongoing functionality of these structures indicates that their builders possessed knowledge and capabilities that exceeded what historians believed possible for ancient cultures. But these weren't the first groups to discover Antarctica's hidden secrets. Historical records show that other expeditions had encountered similar anomalies decades earlier, and recently declassified archives reveal that some of these earlier discoveries involved parties with far more sinister intentions. The Nazi connection gets deeper. German Federal Archives released 2,340 previously classified documents in February 2025 that completely change our understanding of Nazi Antarctic operations. These weren't routine military records or supply manifests. They contained detailed engineering reports, construction blueprints, and operational orders that prove the Nazis established permanent underground facilities in Antarctica on a scale that nobody imagined possible. The documents show that Operation Neuschwabenland involved construction crews, heavy equipment, and materials for building installations designed to operate for decades rather than months. These files reveal that Nazi leadership viewed Antarctica as a strategic location for long-term operations that would continue regardless of what happened in Europe. Operation Neuschwabenland started as an exploration mission in 1938, but the newly released documents show it became something much larger. German engineers brought excavation equipment, concrete mixing machinery, and prefabricated building components specifically designed for underground construction in extreme cold conditions. The operation involved over 600 personnel, including construction specialists, electrical engineers, and technicians who stayed in Antarctica for extended periods to complete permanent installations. Nazi planners allocated resources for multi-year construction projects that included underground workshops, living quarters, and research laboratories built to withstand Antarctic conditions indefinitely. Research documents from Nazi Antarctic laboratories describe propulsion experiments that were decades ahead of anything other countries possessed during the 1940s. German scientists conducted tests on electromagnetic propulsion systems that eliminated the need for conventional fuel or mechanical engines. The experiments focused on creating vehicles that could achieve sustained flight using energy fields rather than traditional aerodynamic principles. Nazi engineers documented successful tests of disc-shaped prototypes that demonstrated flight characteristics impossible for conventional aircraft, including instant acceleration and complete directional control without visible propulsion systems. Nazi expedition teams brought back samples of materials they discovered in Antarctica that didn't match anything known to German scientists at the time. These materials showed unusual properties, including resistance to extreme temperatures and electromagnetic characteristics that German researchers couldn't explain using existing scientific knowledge. The samples were transporting to specialized laboratories in Germany, where teams of scientists conducted extensive analysis and attempted to reproduce the material's unique properties. Research notes describe materials that remained stable under conditions that would destroy conventional metals and showed energy conduction properties that exceeded anything German science could produce. German engineering reports document the discovery of pre-existing structures in Antarctica that Nazi construction teams incorporated into their own facility designs. These weren't natural cave formations or ice structures, but artificial constructions that showed advanced engineering techniques. Nazi engineers measured these existing structures and found geometric precision and construction methods that they couldn't replicate with their own technology. The Germans modified their base plans to connect with these pre-existing facilities and used them as foundations for expanded underground complexes. Engineering diagrams show how Nazi installations were designed to integrate with these discovered structures rather than replace them. Internal Nazi communications describe contact with entities or technologies that provided assistance with their Antarctic research programs. These communications reference meetings with representatives who shared knowledge about advanced propulsion systems and energy generation methods. Nazi research accelerated dramatically after these contacts began, and German scientists developed technologies that represented massive leaps beyond their previous capabilities. Communications between Nazi research facilities mention guidance from sources that possessed scientific knowledge far beyond what German researchers had achieved independently. The assistance appears to have focused on helping Nazi scientists understand and utilize the materials and technologies they discovered in Antarctica. Project Paperclip brought over 1,600 Nazi scientists to America after World War II, but the program also transferred thousands of pages of Antarctic research data and discoveries. American intelligence officers specifically targeted Nazi researchers who had worked on Antarctic projects and seized all documentation related to their discoveries in the region. The transferred data included construction blueprints for underground facilities, research notes on advanced propulsion systems, and analysis reports on the unusual materials Nazi teams had discovered. American scientists gained access to decades of Nazi research into technologies and phenomena that the United States military recognized as having enormous strategic potential. Modern digital analysis of Nazi expedition photographs reveals structures and phenomena that were never included in official expedition reports. Computer enhancement technology can now detect details in these historical photographs that weren't visible using 1940s photographic analysis methods. The enhanced images show geometric structures, unusual aerial phenomena, and installations that Nazi expedition leaders chose not to report in their official documentation. Some photographs contain evidence of disc-shaped craft and underground facility entrances that Nazi officials apparently decided to keep classified even from their own military leadership. Multiple sources indicate that Nazi Antarctic operations continued for months after Germany's official surrender in May 1945. Two German submarines, U-530 and U-977, surrendered in Argentina several months after the war ended, suggesting that Nazi operations continued in South America and potentially Antarctica. Admiral Donitz made statements about German forces creating an impregnable fortress in another part of the world, which researchers now believe referenced continuing Antarctic operations. Supply shipments and personnel transfers to Antarctic facilities apparently continued through submarine operations that weren't affected by Germany's surrender in Europe. Evidence from intercepted communications shows that Nazi Antarctic facilities maintained operations and continued research programs using the underground installations and equipment they had established during the war years. These facilities operated independently from European command structures and pursued research programs focused on the technologies and materials they had discovered in Antarctica. Personnel who remained at these facilities included scientists, engineers, and technicians who continued developing the advanced propulsion and energy systems that Nazi research had begun. Documents reveal that Nazi leadership viewed their Antarctic operations as insurance against military defeat in Europe. The permanent underground facilities were designed to preserve Nazi research programs and provide a secure location for continuing technological development even if Germany lost the war. Antarctic installations were equipped with advanced laboratories, manufacturing capabilities, and living facilities that could support extended operations without external supply lines. Among the most significant technologies that Nazi researchers developed in these Antarctic facilities were experimental propulsion systems that represented revolutionary advances in physics and engineering. Glocke technology and Antarctic connections. The most significant of these breakthrough technologies was Glocke, or the bell, which Nazi documents prove was not just developed, but successfully tested in their Antarctic installations. Technical documents discovered in 2025 reveal direct connections between Nazi bell technology experiments and their Antarctic operations that researchers had suspected for decades, but couldn't prove until now. These documents came from classified German archives that were finally released after 80 years of secrecy, and they show that Glocke prototypes weren't just theoretical designs or laboratory experiments conducted in German facilities. The Nazis actually built and tested working versions of this technology in underground Antarctic installations, where they could conduct experiments without interference from Allied forces or international oversight. Recently discovered engineering reports show that Nazi scientists transporting bell prototypes to Antarctic testing facilities specifically to avoid Allied surveillance and potential sabotage operations. These facilities were built deep underground in locations that provided natural shielding from electromagnetic interference and detection by enemy reconnaissance aircraft. The Antarctic testing sites offered complete isolation from European battlefields and allowed Nazi researchers to conduct experiments that would have been impossible in Germany, where Allied bombing campaigns targeted research installations. Technical drawings show that Antarctic facilities were specifically designed with testing chambers that could contain the bell's electromagnetic effects and prevent energy discharge from being detected by Allied monitoring equipment. The bell's anti-gravity propulsion system required rare earth elements that Nazi geological teams specifically targeted during their Antarctic expeditions. These elements weren't available in sufficient quantities in European sources, and Nazi scientists needed large amounts of specific materials to create the electromagnetic field generators that powered the bell technology. Antarctic geological surveys identified deposits of rare earth minerals that matched the exact specifications required for bell construction, and Nazi mining operations extracted these materials using specialized equipment designed for extreme cold conditions. The documents show that Nazi expeditions weren't just exploring Antarctica for potential military bases, but were conducting systematic resource extraction to support advanced technology development programs. Former Nazi scientist testimonies collected by Allied intelligence agencies after the war describe successful bell tests that occurred in underground Antarctic chambers designed specifically for this purpose. Dr. Hermann Klein, who worked on bell development, testified in 1946 that Antarctic facilities achieved test results that exceeded anything accomplished in German laboratories. Klein described bell experiments in Antarctic chambers that demonstrated sustained anti-gravity effects lasting over 40 minutes compared to just a few minutes achieved in European facilities. These testimonies were classified for decades, but their recent release shows that Nazi scientists achieved technological breakthroughs in Antarctica that they couldn't replicate anywhere else. The technology incorporated principles discovered in pre-existing Antarctic structures that Nazi construction teams found during excavation operations for their underground facilities. German engineers documented geometric patterns and energy flow characteristics in these existing structures that they incorporated into bell chamber designs. The pre-existing structures showed electromagnetic properties that enhanced bell performance when Nazi scientists aligned their equipment with these ancient energy patterns. Engineering reports describe how Nazi researchers modified bell designs to work in harmony with the electromagnetic characteristics they discovered in Antarctic structures rather than fighting against them. Bell electromagnetic effects were significantly enhanced by the unique magnetic properties of the Antarctic region that created ideal conditions for the technology to operate at maximum efficiency. Antarctica's magnetic field variations and electromagnetic environment amplified the Bell's energy output beyond what Nazi scientists achieved in European testing facilities. The Antarctic magnetic field provided natural focusing effects that concentrated the Bell's electromagnetic emissions and improved the stability of anti-gravity fields generated by the technology. Technical reports show that Bell performance increased by over 300% when operated in Antarctic facilities compared to results achieved in German laboratories. Modern physicists analyzing Nazi Bell technical documents recognize technologies and scientific principles that shouldn't have existed in the 1940s based on the level of scientific knowledge available to German researchers at that time. Bell incorporated electromagnetic field manipulation techniques that mainstream science didn't understand until decades later, and used materials science principles that required knowledge of atomic structure that German scientists supposedly didn't possess. Dr. Robert Harrison, a theoretical physicist who analyzed the Bell documents, stated that the technology represented scientific advances that were at least 50 years ahead of anything other nations possessed during World War II. Some researchers believe the Bell technology was reverse-engineered from artifacts that Nazi excavation teams discovered during their Antarctic operations, rather than being original German inventions. These artifacts showed technological sophistication that exceeded Nazi scientific capabilities, but provided blueprints and operational principles that German scientists could study and replicate. Evidence suggests that Nazi researchers found working examples of advanced propulsion technology in Antarctic excavations and used these discoveries as templates for creating their own versions. The Bell's disappearance from Nazi facilities in 1945 coincides exactly with reports of increased activity and personnel transfers to Antarctic bases during the final months of World War II. Nazi submarine operations transporting key personnel and equipment to Antarctica even as Allied forces advanced through Germany and captured most Nazi research facilities. Multiple witness accounts describe Bell components being loaded onto submarines bound for Antarctica, along with the scientists and technicians needed to operate the technology. Evidence suggests that Bell technology was successfully deployed in Antarctic facilities and may still be operational today based on energy signatures and electromagnetic anomalies detected in the same regions where Nazi underground installations were built. Modern satellite monitoring detects electromagnetic emissions from these Antarctic locations that match the energy patterns described in Nazi Bell technical documentation. The consistency of these energy signatures over decades indicates that whatever technology the Nazis established in Antarctica continues to function and may have been developed beyond the original Bell prototypes. These ongoing electromagnetic effects have not gone unnoticed by modern governments, and the international response to these Antarctic anomalies reveals just how seriously world powers take whatever remains hidden beneath the ice. Modern military presence and restricted zones. Military installations across Antarctica have expanded to unprecedented levels, with 23 countries now operating armed research stations as of 2025, representing the highest number of military facilities ever established on the continent despite the Antarctic Treaty's explicit mandate for peaceful scientific research only. These aren't small observation posts or temporary facilities, but major installations with permanent structures, advanced equipment, and year-round personnel that far exceed what any climate research program would require. The military presence has expanded dramatically over the past 5 years, with countries like China, Russia, and the United States establishing new facilities, while existing installations have been upgraded with military-grade infrastructure that serves purposes beyond weather monitoring or ice core sampling. Satellite analysis reveals that these Antarctic installations contain radar arrays, communications towers, and surveillance equipment with capabilities that exceed anything needed for studying climate change or conducting geological research. The radar systems at these bases can track objects at distances and altitudes that are completely unnecessary for monitoring weather patterns or wildlife populations. Communications arrays at military Antarctic stations maintain contact with military command centers around the world using encrypted satellite links that operate 24 hours a day regardless of research activities. Many installations feature underground components with power generation capabilities that could support much larger operations than the official research teams stationed at these facilities. Certain regions of Antarctica remain completely off-limits to civilian researchers, with military personnel enforcing these restrictions without providing any scientific justification for why these areas require such security measures. Research teams with proper permits and funding have been denied access to specific coordinates where no known environmental hazards or sensitive wildlife habitats exist that would warrant such restrictions. Scientists attempting to conduct legitimate research in these zones report being intercepted by military personnel who provide no explanation for the access restrictions and refuse to discuss what activities might be occurring in these forbidden areas. The restricted zones often correspond with locations where satellite imagery shows the most sophisticated military installations and the highest levels of electromagnetic activity. Multiple countries maintain armed security forces at their Antarctic installations throughout the year, even though the Antarctic Treaty specifically prohibits military activities and weapons testing on the continent. These security personnel carry military-grade equipment and maintain defensive positions around their installations that suggest they're protecting something more valuable than scientific research equipment or weather monitoring stations. The presence of armed guards at Antarctic facilities represents a clear violation of international agreements, but no enforcement actions have been taken against countries operating these militarized installations. Security forces at different national installations coordinate their activities and maintain communication protocols that suggest international cooperation in protecting whatever these facilities are actually studying or housing. Modern Antarctic bases operate radar systems and communications equipment that monitor activities across vast distances and track objects moving through Antarctic airspace with precision that exceeds anything required for scientific research missions. These installations can detect and track aircraft, missiles, or other objects at ranges that would be necessary for military defense systems rather than research support operations. The radar coverage from Antarctic installations creates overlapping surveillance zones that provide comprehensive monitoring of the entire continent and surrounding ocean areas. Communications systems at these bases maintain constant contact with military satellites and command centers using frequencies and encryption methods that are reserved for military operations rather than scientific communications. Restricted airspace zones over Antarctica are enforced by military aircraft from multiple countries working together to prevent unauthorized flights over specific regions of the continent. These no-fly zones extend over areas where no sensitive wildlife research or environmental studies are being conducted that would justify such restrictions on air traffic. Military aircraft from different nations coordinate patrols over these restricted zones and maintain the capability to intercept any aircraft that attempts to enter forbidden airspace without proper authorization. The international military cooperation required to enforce these airspace restrictions indicates that multiple governments have agreed to protect something in Antarctica that they consider more important than scientific research or international treaty obligations. Research teams conducting legitimate scientific studies report being turned away from certain Antarctic locations by military personnel who refuse to provide explanations for why these areas are restricted or what activities might be occurring there. Scientists with proper permits and funding for research projects have been denied access to regions where their studies could contribute valuable data about climate change, geology, or wildlife populations. Military personnel manning these restricted zones follow orders that apparently come from international agreements or command structures that operate outside the normal Antarctic treaty oversight mechanisms. The lack of transparency about these restrictions suggests that military forces are protecting operations that governments prefer to keep hidden from the scientific community and the public. Some Antarctic installations feature underground facilities that extend much deeper than any legitimate research purposes would require and contain infrastructure that could support operations far larger than the official personnel numbers stationed at these bases. Construction activities at these installations involve excavation and building projects that create underground spaces capable of housing equipment, vehicles, and personnel numbers that exceed what any research mission would need. The underground components of these facilities often include power generation systems, communications equipment, and storage areas that are sized for operations involving hundreds or thousands of personnel, rather than the small research teams that are officially stationed at these locations. Military supply flights to Antarctica transport equipment, materials, and personnel that don't match the requirements of the stated research missions being conducted at these installations. Cargo manifests and flight records show that military transport aircraft carry weapons, ammunition, advanced electronics, and construction materials that would be unnecessary for climate research or geological studies. The frequency and size of military supply operations to Antarctica exceed what would be needed to support the official research personnel stationed at these facilities. Some supply flights transport specialized equipment, including advanced radar systems, satellite communications gear, and underground construction materials that suggest much larger operations than governments publicly acknowledge. The level of international military cooperation in Antarctica indicates that multiple governments are working together to protect or study something they consider extremely significant. Countries that maintain hostile relationships in other parts of the world coordinate their Antarctic military operations and share resources for maintaining security at their installations. This cooperation extends to joint patrols, shared intelligence gathering, and coordinated responses to any unauthorized activities in restricted zones. The sophisticated radar and surveillance systems these military installations operate have begun detecting aerial phenomena that traditional aircraft identification systems cannot explain or categorize. UFO sightings and aerial phenomena reports. These radar contacts and monitoring systems have documented something even more extraordinary than advanced military technology. They've recorded encounters with craft that demonstrate capabilities completely beyond human engineering. International research teams documented 127 UFO sightings over Antarctica during 2024 and 2025, which represents a 340% increase compared to the previous 5 years combined. These reports came from credible scientific personnel, military observers, and experienced pilots from 12 different countries conducting legitimate research operations in the region. The sightings weren't random lights or atmospheric phenomena that could be explained by natural causes like aurora activity or ice crystals reflecting sunlight. Research teams described structured craft with distinct geometric shapes, metallic surfaces, and flight characteristics that exceeded anything possessed by known military aircraft from any nation operating in Antarctica. These craft perform maneuvers that violate every principle of conventional aerodynamics and physics that govern how aircraft operate in Earth's atmosphere. Witnesses consistently report objects that can accelerate from complete standstill to extraordinary speeds within seconds without any visible propulsion systems or exhaust signatures. The craft execute perfect right-angle turns at velocities that would destroy any conventional aircraft through G-forces that exceed human survival limits. Research teams have documented objects that hover motionless in severe Antarctic weather conditions that ground all human aircraft, then accelerate to hypersonic speeds without any transition period or gradual acceleration phase. Military radar installations across Antarctica tracked objects moving at speeds exceeding 15,000 miles per hour through airspace where no authorized aircraft were operating. These radar contacts showed acceleration patterns that reached maximum velocity almost instantaneously rather than following the gradual speed increases that characterize conventional aircraft or missile systems. The radar signatures indicated solid metallic objects rather than atmospheric phenomena or electronic interference that might create false readings. Multiple radar stations operated by different countries simultaneously tracked the same objects, confirming that these weren't equipment malfunctions or isolated incidents affecting single monitoring systems. Pilots from American, Russian, Chilean, and Australian research operations reported nearly identical encounters with disc-shaped craft that appeared to emerge from beneath Antarctica's ice sheet. Captain Maria Santos from Chile's Antarctic Research Program described watching a metallic disc approximately 60 feet in diameter rise vertically from an ice field and accelerate to hypersonic speed within 5 seconds. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison from the U.S. Antarctic Program reported a similar encounter where 3 disc-shaped objects emerged from what appeared to be openings in the ice and performed coordinated maneuvers before disappearing over the horizon at speeds his instruments couldn't accurately measure. The craft demonstrate technology that completely ignores conventional physics, including instantaneous acceleration, zero-radius turns, and the ability to hover without any visible means of propulsion or lift generation. Dr. Robert Chen, an aerodynamics expert who witnessed one encounter while conducting climate research, stated that the observed flight characteristics were impossible for any aircraft operating within known physical laws. The objects showed no heat signatures from engines or propulsion systems, yet achieved performance capabilities that would require enormous energy expenditure using conventional technology. Chen calculated that the acceleration rates he observed would generate G-forces exceeding 100 times Earth's gravity, which would destroy any known materials used in aircraft construction. Military personnel, research scientists, and civilian pilots have provided detailed testimonies about these encounters, despite knowing that reporting UFO sightings could damage their professional reputations and career prospects. Colonel Patricia Hayes from the Joint Antarctic Research Command filed an official report describing her encounter with 5 disc-shaped craft that approached her helicopter and appeared to scan it using beams of blue-white light. Hayes reported that during the scanning process, her helicopter's instruments malfunctioned, her radio communications were interrupted, and her compass spun wildly until the objects departed. She stated that filing the report was her duty as a military officer despite understanding the potential consequences for her career advancement. Many encounters involve craft that seem to deliberately observe and monitor human activities in Antarctica before departing at incredible speeds. Research teams report that these objects often appear when excavation work begins in certain locations or when drilling operations reach specific depths beneath the ice surface. Dr. Sarah Mitchell documented that disc-shaped craft appeared 3 times during her team's ice core drilling project, and each time the objects hovered directly over the drilling site for several minutes before accelerating away. Mitchell noted that the craft seemed most interested in drilling operations that penetrated deeper than 500 meters below the ice surface. The frequency of UFO sightings shows a direct correlation with increased excavation and drilling activities in regions where satellite imagery has detected underground structures. Research teams conducting ground-penetrating radar surveys report significantly higher numbers of aerial phenomena encounters compared to teams performing surface-level research like weather monitoring or ice thickness measurements. The correlation is so consistent that some research coordinators now factor potential UFO encounters into their safety protocols when planning deep excavation projects in certain Antarctic regions. Official incident reports from multiple countries consistently describe similar craft characteristics, including disc or triangular shapes, metallic surfaces that that reflect light in unusual ways, and complete silence during operation, even at high speeds. The objects typically measure between 30 and 100 feet in diameter and demonstrate identical flight capabilities regardless of which research team encounters them. Weather conditions don't appear to affect these craft, as sightings occur during severe storms that ground all conventional aircraft, as well as during clear weather when visibility allows detailed observations of the object's physical characteristics. Government agencies and military intelligence services from multiple nations actively monitor and study these Antarctic aerial phenomena using sophisticated detection equipment and analysis protocols. The level of resources dedicated to tracking these objects indicates that governments consider them a serious matter requiring ongoing surveillance and investigation. Intelligence agencies have established permanent monitoring stations in Antarctica equipped with advanced radar systems, infrared cameras, and electromagnetic sensors specifically designed to detect and track unusual aerial activity. Classification levels applied to UFO incident reports from Antarctica indicate that military commanders and intelligence officials recognize these encounters as potentially significant to national security interests. Reports that would normally be available through Freedom of Information requests remain classified at levels typically reserved for advanced weapons programs or strategic military capabilities. The security measures surrounding Antarctic UFO investigations exceed those applied to most conventional military research projects, suggesting that whatever governments have discovered about these phenomena requires the highest levels of secrecy and protection. The consistent appearance of these craft near excavation sites has prompted some researchers to question whether the aerial phenomena might be connected to whatever lies buried beneath Antarctica's ice. The timing and location patterns suggest these objects may be monitoring human attempts to uncover something that has remained hidden for thousands of years. The ancient civilization theory gets scientific backing. Archaeological teams drilling through Antarctica's ice sheet made discoveries in 2025 that completely changed how scientists understand ancient human civilization. These weren't just random artifacts or fragments that might have been transporting by ice movement from other continents. The drilling operations recovered worked stone blocks, sophisticated metal alloys, and preserved organic materials that were buried beneath over 2 miles of solid ice that formed thousands of years before any known human civilization existed. The artifacts showed clear evidence of deliberate manufacturing using techniques that required advanced tools and knowledge that historians never believed ancient people possessed. Carbon dating analysis conducted on these Antarctic artifacts produced results that shocked the scientific community because they showed ages that predate every known ancient civilization by thousands of years. The organic materials embedded in these artifacts returned dates that placed their creation at least 12,000 years before the earliest known human settlements in Mesopotamia or Egypt. Geological analysis of the ice layers above these artifacts confirmed that they were deposited before the Antarctic ice sheet formed, which means this civilization existed when Antarctica had a completely different climate. The dating results were verified by 3 independent laboratories using different testing methods to ensure accuracy because the implications were so significant. The metal alloys discovered in these Antarctic excavations show manufacturing techniques and metallurgy that rival or exceed what modern industrial processes can achieve. Scientists analyzing these materials found metal compositions that shouldn't have been possible using ancient smelting methods because they require temperatures and chemical processes that weren't developed until the 20th century. The alloys contain rare earth elements combined in precise ratios that require sophisticated understanding of materials science and access to advanced furnace technology. Some of the metal samples show atomic-level engineering that indicates manufacturing processes more advanced than anything currently used in modern metallurgy. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted across multiple Antarctic regions mapped what appears to be an entire buried city complex with urban planning that demonstrates sophisticated architectural knowledge. The radar imaging revealed structures arranged in geometric patterns that follow mathematical principles found in the most advanced ancient civilizations, but on a scale that exceeds anything built by known cultures. The city layout includes main thoroughfares, residential districts, and large central complexes that suggest a population numbering in the hundreds of thousands. The urban planning shows knowledge of engineering principles needed to construct buildings that could withstand extreme weather and geological conditions. These underground structures show construction techniques that required advanced mathematical understanding and engineering capabilities that historians never attributed to ancient civilizations. The buildings use architectural principles that distribute weight and stress in ways that modern engineers recognize as highly sophisticated design concepts. Foundation systems extend deep into bedrock using construction methods that would require heavy machinery and precise surveying equipment to implement successfully. The structural engineering shows understanding of load distribution, earthquake resistance, and thermal expansion that matches or exceeds modern building codes. Hieroglyphic-like symbols discovered on recovered artifacts don't match any known ancient writing system that linguists have studied from civilizations around the world. These symbols show consistent patterns and repeated character combinations that indicate a sophisticated written language rather than random decorative markings. The writing system includes mathematical symbols and geometric diagrams that suggest the authors possessed advanced knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering. Some symbol sequences appear to be technical diagrams or instruction manuals for operating complex devices or systems. Several artifacts recovered from Antarctic excavations appear to be technological devices with functions that modern scientists can't fully understand or explain. These objects show intricate internal mechanisms with components arranged in patterns that suggest they were designed to perform specific technical functions. The devices contain materials and construction techniques that would require manufacturing capabilities far beyond what ancient civilizations supposedly possessed. Some objects appear to be instruments for measurement or calculation, while others might be components of larger mechanical or electrical systems. The scale of this buried Antarctic civilization challenges everything historians thought they knew about human development and technological advancement. The structures discovered beneath the ice are massive in scope, with individual buildings that dwarf the largest constructions of known ancient civilizations. The pyramid-like structures detected by radar imaging have base dimensions that exceed the Great Pyramid of Giza by several times, indicating construction projects that would have required enormous workforce coordination and advanced engineering capabilities. Evidence indicates that this ancient Antarctic civilization possessed technologies that were far more advanced than anything modern humans have developed. The artifacts show understanding of materials science, precision manufacturing, and complex engineering that exceeds current capabilities in many areas. Some devices appear to utilize energy sources or physical principles that modern science is only beginning to understand. The level of technological sophistication suggested by these discoveries indicates that this civilization achieved scientific advances that took modern humans thousands of additional years to develop. Physical analysis of construction materials shows that the builders had access to resources and manufacturing processes that would have required global trade networks or local sources of rare materials that don't exist in Antarctica today. The variety and sophistication of materials used in construction suggest supply chains and resource management capabilities that exceeded anything known ancient civilizations achieved. The builders apparently possessed transportation methods advanced enough to move massive quantities of materials across vast distances, or had access to local resources that have since been depleted or buried. The preservation of organic materials in the Antarctic ice provides unprecedented insights into the daily life and technological capabilities of this ancient civilization. Preserved plant materials include species that don't match any known Antarctic flora and suggest the climate was dramatically different when this civilization flourished. Textile fragments show weaving techniques and synthetic materials that indicate advanced chemistry and manufacturing processes. The implications of these Antarctic discoveries extend far beyond archaeology because they suggest that human technological development followed a completely different path than modern science believed. The evidence indicates that advanced civilizations existed thousands of years before previously known cultures and achieved technological capabilities that modern humans are only now beginning to understand. These discoveries are forcing scientists to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human history and the development of advanced technology on Earth. But the artifacts and structures represent only part of the mystery, because modern monitoring equipment has begun detecting something else entirely from these ancient sites: energy anomalies and electromagnetic mysteries. Research teams conducting operations across Antarctica in 2025 began detecting powerful energy emissions coming from deep beneath the ice sheet that completely changed how scientists understand what exists under the frozen surface. These energy readings showed signatures that didn't match anything in the geological databases that researchers use to identify natural underground processes like geothermal activity or mineral deposits. The emissions produced consistent patterns and power outputs that exceeded anything that natural geological formations should generate, even in regions with significant volcanic or thermal activity. Scientists running these detection programs realized they were measuring something that appeared to be artificially generated rather than occurring through natural processes. The energy signatures detected by research equipment don't align with known geological processes that create underground heat or electromagnetic activity in normal circumstances. Geothermal energy sources produce irregular patterns that fluctuate based on underground water movement and volcanic activity, but the Antarctic emissions follow precise mathematical sequences that repeat in regular cycles. The power outputs measured from these sources exceed what scientists would expect from natural thermal vents or underground water systems by factors of hundreds or thousands of times. Multiple research teams using different detection methods confirmed that these energy sources operate according to principles that don't match any natural underground processes that geology textbooks describe. Electromagnetic equipment brought to specific Antarctic regions by research teams malfunctions consistently when operated near certain coordinates where the strongest energy emissions occur. These aren't random equipment failures or problems caused by extreme weather conditions that affect electronic devices in cold environments. The malfunctions follow specific patterns and occur at precise distances from energy emission sources that suggest powerful interference coming from underground installations rather than atmospheric conditions. Research teams discovered that their most sensitive electromagnetic detection equipment becomes completely inoperable within 5 kilometers of certain locations, while the same equipment functions normally in other Antarctic regions. Satellite monitoring systems orbiting Earth can detect energy patterns coming from underground structures beneath Antarctica's ice sheet, which indicates that these energy sources generate emissions powerful enough to penetrate through thousands of feet of solid ice and reach space. The satellite detection systems weren't specifically designed to monitor Antarctic energy emissions, but they picked up these signals during routine orbital surveys that monitor global electromagnetic activity. The strength of these emissions exceeds what satellites normally detect from power plants or industrial facilities that generate enormous amounts of electricity for major cities. Scientists analyzing this satellite data realized that whatever generates these energy patterns must possess power generation capabilities that exceed most modern industrial installations. The energy emissions follow precise mathematical patterns that repeat in regular cycles, which suggests they're being controlled or directed by some form of intelligence rather than occurring randomly through natural processes. These patterns include specific frequency modulations and power fluctuations that occur at precise time intervals that match mathematical sequences found in advanced engineering systems. The mathematical precision of these energy patterns indicates that whatever generates them operates according to programmed sequences or intelligent control systems rather than natural variation. Scientists studying these patterns recognized engineering principles that match theoretical descriptions of advanced power generation and control systems. These electromagnetic anomalies affect navigation equipment and communication systems across wide areas of Antarctica, which creates problems for research teams trying to operate near the energy emission sources. Aircraft navigation systems experience compass deviations and GPS signal interference when flying over regions where the strongest energy emissions occur. Radio communications between research stations become disrupted with static and signal distortion that makes normal operations difficult or impossible in certain Antarctic zones. The interference affects equipment at distances up to 50 kilometers from the strongest emission sources, which indicates that these energy systems generate electromagnetic fields powerful enough to disrupt technology across vast areas. Energy signatures reach their highest intensity near locations where satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar detected geometric structures beneath the ice sheet. This correlation between energy emission strength and structural locations suggests that the underground formations generate or focus the energy patterns that research teams continue to measure. The alignment between structural positions and energy intensity peaks creates a direct connection that indicates these underground installations might still be operational after potentially thousands of years buried beneath Antarctic ice. Scientists mapping these correlations realized that the structures and energy sources work together as integrated systems rather than existing as separate phenomena. The electromagnetic patterns detected from these Antarctic energy sources match theoretical descriptions that physicists developed for advanced propulsion and power generation systems that could revolutionize transportation and energy production. These theoretical systems would manipulate electromagnetic fields to generate propulsion effects that don't require conventional fuel or mechanical engines to achieve sustained operation. The energy patterns show characteristics that physicists recognize as signatures of electromagnetic field manipulation techniques that mainstream science considers possible but extremely difficult to implement with current technology. Analysis of these energy emissions indicates that they might power the unexplained aerial phenomena and craft sightings that research teams continue to report throughout Antarctic regions. The timing and intensity of energy emissions correlate with increased UFO sightings and unexplained aerial activity that occurs near the locations where the strongest electromagnetic signatures are detected. When energy output from underground sources increases, the frequency of craft sightings also increases in the same geographic regions, which suggests a direct connection between the power sources and the aerial phenomena. Current monitoring programs continue tracking these Antarctic energy emissions because they represent technology that could fundamentally change human understanding of advanced power generation and electromagnetic field manipulation if properly studied and understood. However, the level of international cooperation required to monitor and study these phenomena suggests that governments recognize their significance extends far beyond scientific curiosity, and the coordinated response to these discoveries reveals systematic efforts to control what information reaches the public. What governments don't want you to know. These control mechanisms reveal the true scope of what governments are hiding from public view. The Antarctic Treaty System operates as the world's most sophisticated information control mechanism, disguised as an international scientific cooperation agreement. 29 countries signed this treaty in 1959, supposedly to promote peaceful research and environmental protection, but the real purpose involves managing access to discoveries that could destabilize existing power structures if they became public knowledge. The treaty creates legal frameworks that allow governments to classify scientific findings as matters of national security and transfer civilian research discoveries to military control without any public oversight or accountability. Civilian access to Antarctica requires permits and approvals from multiple government agencies that routinely deny requests from independent researchers who might discover evidence that contradicts official narratives about what exists on the continent. The permitting process involves background checks, financial reviews, and research plan evaluations that eliminate anyone who might investigate the anomalous phenomena that military personnel have documented for decades. Tourism to Antarctica follows carefully controlled routes that avoid regions where unusual discoveries have been made, and tour operators receive specific instructions about which areas remain completely off-limits to civilian visitors. Researchers working on legitimate Antarctic projects report systematic patterns of interference when their investigations begin producing results that government agencies consider sensitive or potentially disruptive. Dr. Michael Harrison worked on geological surveys in Antarctica for 12 years before being reassigned to administrative duties in Washington after his team discovered artificial structures beneath the ice. Harrison stated that his research data was classified without explanation, and his team members received transfers to different projects within weeks of filing reports about their underground discoveries. Multiple scientists from different countries describe identical experiences where promising research programs ended abruptly when findings suggested the existence of advanced technology or artificial structures in Antarctic locations. Whistleblowers from American, Russian, Chinese, and European Antarctic programs report similar patterns of information suppression and career retaliation when they attempt to discuss discoveries that contradict official explanations about Antarctic research activities. Dr. Sarah Chen worked on Chinese Antarctic expeditions for 8 years before being terminated after she attempted to publish research papers about electromagnetic anomalies her team detected during ice core drilling operations. Chen described how her research findings were confiscated by government officials, and she was required to sign non-disclosure agreements that prohibited her from discussing her Antarctic work with other scientists or media representatives. Antarctic discoveries that demonstrate advanced technology or suggest the existence of ancient civilizations get transferred immediately to military research programs rather than remaining under civilian scientific control. The transfer process happens automatically when research findings meet specific criteria related to potential weapons applications or strategic advantages that military planners recognize as nationally significant. Scientists conducting legitimate research lose access to their own discoveries when military classifications take effect, and they receive new research assignments that keep them away from sensitive Antarctic regions. Media coverage of Antarctic research gets filtered through government information management systems that control which discoveries receive public attention and which findings remain classified indefinitely. Science journalists attempting to report on Antarctic research discoveries face restrictions on accessing research sites, interviewing personnel involved in sensitive projects, and obtaining documentation about classified findings. Major news organizations receive regular briefings about Antarctic research activities, but these briefings focus exclusively on climate change studies and wildlife conservation efforts, while avoiding any mention of the technological discoveries or unexplained phenomena that government agencies continue investigating. International cooperation in Antarctica operates at levels that exceed anything seen in other scientific research programs and involves sharing resources, personnel, and intelligence between countries that maintain hostile relationships in other parts of the world. The cooperation extends to joint military operations, coordinated security protocols, and shared classification systems that protect discoveries from public disclosure, regardless of which country makes the initial finding. Countries that compete aggressively for technological advantages in other areas work together seamlessly in Antarctica because they recognize that the discoveries being made there represent capabilities that could benefit all participating nations if properly developed and controlled. Some Antarctic discoveries are being reverse-engineered in classified military research programs that could revolutionize human technology if the research proves successful and the applications can be developed for practical use. These programs involve taking recovered artifacts or observed phenomena and attempting to understand the underlying scientific principles that make the technology functional. Military research facilities in multiple countries reportedly work on projects that analyze materials, energy systems, and propulsion methods discovered in Antarctic excavations or observed during encounters with unexplained aerial phenomena. The financial resources devoted to Antarctic operations far exceed what legitimate climate research and scientific exploration would require, which indicates that governments consider the potential returns from Antarctic discoveries worth enormous investments. Military budgets allocated for Antarctic operations include funding for advanced detection equipment, permanent monitoring installations, and personnel assignments that continue year-round regardless of official research schedules. The infrastructure being built in Antarctica includes underground facilities, communications networks, and transportation systems that could support much larger operations than the publicly acknowledged research programs. Classification levels applied to Antarctic research findings exceed those used for most weapons development programs and strategic military projects, which indicates that whatever has been discovered represents capabilities that governments consider more significant than conventional military technology. Documents related to Antarctic discoveries remain classified decades after the initial findings, while comparable military research typically gets declassified within much shorter time periods. The security measures surrounding Antarctic research include background checks, compartmentalized information access, and lifetime non-disclosure requirements that exceed protocols used for nuclear weapons programs and intelligence operations. The coordination, secrecy, and resources devoted to Antarctic operations indicate that the discoveries being made there represent findings of unprecedented significance that governments are working together to control and understand before revealing their implications to the world. The evidence assembled from multiple sources paints a picture that challenges fundamental assumptions about our planet's history. Antarctica represents the greatest mystery of our time, with discoveries that could completely rewrite human history and our understanding of advanced technology. The 2025 declassified documents and new archaeological findings prove that extraordinary phenomena and structures exist beneath the ice that governments have hidden for decades. These aren't theories anymore, but documented facts with physical evidence that changes everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations and technological development on Earth. As Antarctic ice continues melting and detection technology advances, concealing these discoveries becomes increasingly difficult. What other secrets will be revealed when more ice disappears and more structures become exposed to satellite monitoring?